This is Lloyd Albritton, and the show is Lloyd and Friends. Interesting conversations with interesting people. Joining me in my home studio this morning is my brother Philip Albritton, who will co-host the program with me today, and it will be broadcast, of course, on the Lloyd and Friends YouTube channel. Philip and I will both be hosting this morning because we're going to add a third guest just shortly. Along the way, the road of life, so to speak, we often meet people who influence our lives. I've met a lot of these people. Some influenced my life maybe just a little bit, and others influenced my life a great deal. Many of these people pass into our lives and then pass out, never to be seen again. They leave a little bit of influence, or maybe a lot, but we never see them again. We lose track of them. And in other cases, and this has happened to me several times during my life, we meet those people again many years later, sometimes 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. In fact, that happened with my wife, Gwen. And now that I think about it, we met 45 years after we went to high school together and ended up getting married. And certainly that profoundly changed my life. But the individual that I'm talking about now has to do with the Latter-day Saint Church, the Mormon Church, if you will, properly called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this incident happened in 1961. In fact, 61 years ago in 1961. Kind of strange, isn't it? And this happened when two young men walked into the lives of the Bud and Ossie Lee Albritton family, who had 6 children, and introduced us to a religious philosophy that we readily embraced and have embraced as a family, and with most of us as individuals, with some exception. We have, as many people do, kind of drifted to the right or left of the faith, but it has been a profound influence upon most of us, certainly my life, throughout the last 61 years. And we have reconnected with one of these young men at that time, and I'm going to let Philip say hello here. He's been kind of helping me set things up. Philip, just let me know you're there.
I'm just kind of mostly sitting in listening. I'll say a little bit, but I wanted to, I've been setting up my video camera over there because I'm going to make a video portion of the whole dialogue, not all of it, just here and there, so it makes the YouTube video. It's not all just dialogue. There'll be a little video in it of me and you. Of course, we can't videotape our guest. He's on the other. He's somewhere far away.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, we'll go ahead and dial Ken in. We've tested the lines out and everything, so hopefully we won't be too technologically challenged with this. We'll bring my friend Ken
Gale,
and that's Gale. He would have you know, not Gayle, which he considers kind of a girlish name. But this program will probably be of greatest interest to those who are members of the church, who can identify with some of the things we're talking about. We would certainly invite all listeners to listen in because this is not unique to Mormonism. It's certainly unique to almost everybody when we from time to time meet up with those people who have influenced our lives. Philip, let's give him a dial. See if he answers.
Okay, ring him up. Is he waiting on us to call?
He's waiting on us to call.
Okay.
I'm going to make that call, and when we return, lo and behold, voila, we'll have Ken Gale on the line, hopefully.
All right.
All right, we have on the line now, Philip and I did a little pre-log to the program, and we promised to add a certain Kenneth Raymond Gale on the line. So I think we said you are in Richland, Washington, correct?
Yes, Richland, Washington, that's right.
Okay. Now, Ken, we did a little pre-log, and I introduced the event of what we're going to be talking about was the fact that, along all of our roads of life, we run into people who influence us, some a little, some a lot. And some of those people pass on out of our lives and we never see them again. Others we kind of hook up with later on. And such is the case with you. We've had an opportunity after 61 years of our initial encounter to hook back up again and to renew our fellowship and friendship. And here we are. So maybe a good place to start would be with you. You had that little epiphany on a certain night, and maybe why don't you just tell us anything you want to as far as to that point, coming on your mission and being in the South and some of your impressions. And then we'll kind of lead up to when you met the Albritton family. Will that work for you?
That's fine. I was, at the time, lived in Moses Lake, Washington, which is about 90 miles north towards the Canadian border from Richland. My father went up there. He was a pattern maker at Geneva Steel Plant in Provo originally, but when he got the boys and stuff, he had to move to Moses Lake to be out on a farm so his boys did not have to be rocked to sleep at night. He didn't want them getting in trouble in the city, so he moved out with a relative, Forrest Libbert, and got onto a farm.
Ken, can I interrupt you? Can I interrupt you just for a second? If you may be already doing this, but our waveform is coming in just a little low. Just make sure you're talking directly into your mic on your phone, and you might speak up just a little louder. I'll get a better waveform. Let's try that.
Okay.
That's a little better. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. We went from Provo, Utah, where my dad was a pattern maker at Geneva Steel Plant. At that time, anything made of steel had a wood pattern first, and cast it in sand, and then they would do the thing. But he was not real happy sometimes with some of the trouble we got in. Nothing serious, but he decided we had relatives in Moses Lake, so he moved to Moses Lake to get us out on a farm to teach us how to work and keep us out of mischief, is what my mother called it. I was there until I graduated from high school, and in 1960, that makes me old, and from there, right after I graduated, I went to Hazleton, Idaho with my dad, where he was building a church. I got called on a mission to go to, at the time, Southern States Mission, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and so went to Salt Lake for a week and down to Atlanta, and got sent down to Pensacola, and from Pensacola I got transferred to Atmore, Alabama, and had my companion be Glenn Fuller. And you have in the mission field, you have a day with us. It was Monday when you write your letters, do your wash, do your grocery shopping, whatever you have to do that needs to be done, you don't want to do during the week. And so Monday night we were sitting in different parts of the department, and I think Elder Fuller's talking to me, and he asked me, he said, "I'm not talking to you. Just get back what you're doing and don't bother me." So this went on 2 or 3 times, and he said, "I'm not talking to you. It's okay, get your suit on, Elder Fuller, we have to go." We had a referral, which some member fills out saying, "This is a family you might want to check out that might be interested in the church." So we got in our suit and went out in the dark outlying parts of Atmore. I don't know can't remember what the little town's called, but
it wasn't a town.
Anyway,
it was Nokomis, a little rural farm community.
Right, but it was no street lights, no door, nothing. And how we actually found them, we must have said go 30 yards this way and 2 axle greases off to the left or something. I don't know. But we found the Albrittons that night, and long story short, from then till now has always been a highlight in my life. But there you go, Lloyd.
Okay. Well, what did you? I think you told me that first meeting happened on a Monday night, and you met our parents. Now, I'm going to give my recollection in a minute, which was on a Saturday night. So that must have been your second meeting.
That was the second meeting, yes.
Right. So here we were. My older brother then was 16 years old. I was 14. In fact, had just turned 14. I think this was in October or November. It was. We were baptized that year in November the 16th. So this must have been in October, right around my birthday, my 14th birthday. And my older brother and I, he had gotten his driver's license, and so the highlight of our life during that period of time was going to Atmore, getting Daddy's car, and going to Atmore and cruise, looking for girls. Boys always looking for girls. And that's what we would do Saturday night, is go to the movie show or cruise around the dairy bar and look for girls. Some reason we never caught any, but we were always looking. But it was a highlight of our week, and so on that particular Saturday that I remember, my father called us aside and he said, "Now boys, y'all gonna need to stay home tonight because your mama has a couple of preachers coming over to talk to us." Now, there's nothing that a 14 and 16-year-old boy wanted to do less on a Saturday night than talk to a couple of preachers. Now, our impression of a preacher, we grew up in an area of mostly Baptist and Pentecostal holiness type preachers, and these are mostly older gray-headed guys with big girths, from all those chicken dinners they would eat, and who were kind of what we call holy rollers. They spoke a little louder than usual, sort of like this, and we weren't all that impressed with them, and so as we were crying in our beer, so to speak, sitting on the front porch, whining about missing all the action in town that night, we saw this car come slowly rumbling down the road, a dirt road, like a little 2-lane dirt road, come by our house. And when I say rumble, I mean it had these dual silver, what they call them,
Glass packs.
Glass packs.
It was a white 56 Ford, wasn't it?
It was a white 56 Ford with cruiser fender skirts. Now today, I don't think too many people even know what cruiser fender skirts are, unless they're into this old car show stuff, but they would go all the way over the open part of the back wheel, all the way back to the fender. And this was something that only super cool guys did. And so here's this white Ford, and it pulls up in the driveway, and these two guys with suits and white shirts. Now, only preachers wore suits and white shirts, and we didn't see the preacher all that often, so that in itself was a little strange. And these guys came over and came in the house and began to teach us about some things that we had never experienced before. And when we saw that car, that kind of opened our minds, because these guys were young. They were not old gray-headed guys. They were young guys, and they were both big guys. And so they began to teach us
with funny accents.
They had funny accents, and it was fascinating. And they seemed to just know everything. In fact, I've mentioned this to you again. Back in those days, any question we had, they could just not only answer it, but refer you to the scripture, New Testament, Old Testament, Book of Mormon. They could refer you right directly to that. And I was fascinated how anybody could be so smart. And so a little later, we discovered that they had these little 3x5 cards that they would type up the scripture on, and they would memorize all of that while they're riding around.
Scripture would be one. Hey, excuse me. The scripture would be on one side, and the reference would be on the other side. So when I would test Elder Fuller, I could just give him the chapter and verse on one side, and then turn it over, and he would tell me what was on the other side. So you had to memorize where it was and what it was. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I so desperately wanted to achieve that, and so I duplicated that, and my brother Greg did the same thing, and we used to back and forth memorize those scriptures that way. Now, I didn't know about the back part of it, so I only did the front part. But to this day, 61 years later, I have over here in my desk drawer a little chain with 3 by 5 cards on it with a hole punched in the corner, with those old scriptures that I spent
Lloyd,
14 years old memorizing.
I went through my stuff yesterday and I found mine.
Did you really?
I did.
Well, you know, that's amazing, and not only do I still have the cards, but those scriptures are still in my mind. From time to time, as I'm talking and I searching my head for a reference, it pops right up there. Those things are still in my mind.
Hey, Lloyd, let me interrupt here for a second and back up just that. Elder Gale, Ken, when you were sitting there with Elder Fuller in the apartment and he said he had a referral, that referral was from Mariana Freilich, who was a friend of Mom's at work. And Mariana Freilich was a member, she was one of the Gregsons from the Goodway branch, which was up the road from Atmore.
Up toward Monroe.
And Mama and Sister Freilich worked together at Kimstrand. It was called Kimstrand then. They wore these blue uniforms to work. And so Mama just fell in love with Mariana. They were best of friends. So Mariana Freilich sent in that referral, and that's what you got when you got the referral from her.
So what did you think you had there when you come in the Albritton's home? What did you think after that first visit?
I had been in the South for a while, so I'd been in Atmore, Alabama, but also been in Defuniak Springs, Florida, and other places where there's small communities. So I didn't, I figured, okay, here it is. It's a young family where you can really change lives and make an impression if you're able to do it and if you stay in tune, So we were loving every minute of it. At first, Elder Fuller thought I was crazy when I wanted to get up that night, go out in the dark and find somebody we didn't know. He said, let's do it the next day. And I said, no, we got to do it now. Somebody's prompting me and on me, and I won't be able to sleep tonight, so we got to go do it. So there you go.
And this was a day or a night that you would normally not be out tending to your missionary duties. This was the day you washed your clothes and wrote letters and so forth, correct?
That's right. We were not intending. In fact, it was past. If we were going to go out that night, we would have probably already done it prior to it being that late and dark and stuff. So no, we would not have been out on this night. No, we would not.
Well, that occurred, and we went to. We were invited to go to church that first week, and I remember that when we went, we weren't regular churchgoers at all. We occasionally went with Grandma up to the little Pentecostal church up on the mile or so down the road, but we were never trained or knew very little about religion in general. Certainly nobody ever made a big fuss about us. But when we went to church the first time, I thought it kind of odd or strange. The meeting was held on the upstairs of the American Legion building that is still there, by the way. It was a big empty hall, and they would have dances and stuff on Saturday night, so we would have to clean up the mess on Sunday morning before we met and just meet in little corners of the room. And so when we arrived, my recollection, people were strangely friendly. It seemed like everybody was just delighted to see us. And that had never happened before that I ever knew of, that anybody was so glad to see us. Daddy always kind of kept us out there in the woods because he said, well, we were a bunch of heathens and we'd embarrass him by our heathenish behavior. So we didn't go too many places. And when we showed up there, they treated us like regular first-class citizens. And
well, we had let those in the know, excuse me, let those know that we were bringing some, excuse me, of what we called investigators at the time that may or may not be interested in the church, but basically informed them you were coming, and then what you got was what you always get. Go ahead.
Ah, okay. You had tipped them off. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we went and came back home, and my older brother and I, we were always close, and then Philip and my other brother, with brothers, you kind of tend to pair off there. So Ronnie and I were fairly close in our age and activities, and so we started to discuss this whole thing, and Ronnie said, did you notice anything odd about those guys? And I said, well, not really. What? And he said, well, did you notice that they're both left-handed? And I said, no. Now, Ronnie, he is one to this day to observe minor little things about people. But I said, no, I didn't notice that. But I tell you what, at church today, I did notice another really odd thing. He said, what is that? And I said, well, all the men in that church, they all have the same first name. He said, same first name? Yes. I said, they all have the first name of Elmer. And, when they address one another, instead of saying, Lloyd or Ken or Philip, they would call by the whole last name, the whole name. They would say, Elmer Albritton, or Elmer, what do you think about this, Elmer Gale? And my brother looked at me, and he called me by my first name. What he thought was my first name was Stupid. He said, Stupid? He said, that's not their names. He said, that's some kind of a title that they have. They call one another elder, which is, of course, a priesthood title, and which the men in the priesthood who hold positions of responsibility, bishopric, or sometimes they're referred to as elder, and, of course, missionaries are referred to as elder. We learned that a little bit later, but I thought that kind of strange.
Well, it was only 8 years later that I was called to go on my mission. I was 11 at that time, and then in 1969 I went on my mission to Austria, and I didn't find out until only about a month ago. Here in 2022, I found out from Ron Cochran, Lefty Cochran, that I was the first person to ever be called on a mission from the Atmore branch. And I think Gregory, my younger brother, was probably the second person to be called, because he was called.
You got to put that in some history.
Yeah.
Serious.
I never realized that, but 1969, in the end of the year, in the fall of '69, is when I went on my mission.
Well, I was looking at my notes right here. We met the Albritton family, I think it was October the 11th of '61.
Okay.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Because we were baptized on November the 16th, and at that time, the missionaries presented a format which was using a little flannel board graph. There's on little wires, and you would unroll that flannel board and hook it on those wires to make a little backdrop.
I still used that on mine in 1969. I was still using that format with the flannel board figures.
And you had those little cut-out catalog figures, sort of like we used to cut out of the Sears catalog to play with. As little men had those cut-out figures of Peter, James, and John, and Christ, and so forth, that you would stick to that flannel board. And there were 7 discussions, and which I later learned were had to be memorized, basically word for word. Is that correct?
That's right.
And of course, as when you memorize things, I spent many years in sales, and at times we had to memorize a sales presentation, because otherwise I wouldn't know what to say at all. I just wasn't smart enough. I'd memorize it, and as you begin to memorize it, after a while you begin to make it your own, although it's still the basic is memorized. You kind of make it your own, and so that's what I remember. So the lesson plan was thoroughly not necessarily memorized, but it was developed, of course, not by the elders but by the senior brethren, and it covered everything. It covered all the topics that a person would need to know in order to make a decision as to whether they wanted to join this church or not. Am I correct so far?
Yep. Yes.
Now, you weren't a shy kind of guy in those days, and now, in fact, the personalities at that time, sometimes the young boys, and I might mention to those that maybe don't know this, that the church at that time, I don't know how many missionaries they had worldwide, probably 20,000, if that. Today, that number is, I think, around 70 or 75,000 missionaries.
Yes, it is.
Worldwide. But at that time, it wasn't near about that number. These days, since the church has so many young boys, and you can imagine. Now, my father had 5 boys, and the baby was a girl in our family. And as I look back, I can't imagine how he managed 5 boys. He used to joke that your mama can't have anything nice because us boys would horseplay and would tear everything up. Break a lamp, tussling, always doing that sort of thing. So I can't imagine how the church managed 10,000 or 20,000 or even 75,000 boys and girls. We have a lot of girl missionaries as well, but most of the boys would manage them, out there.
Hey, I want to kick back here. I started thinking about when Elder Gale and Elder Fuller appeared at our house in that car, yeah. and I've had this question in my mind for 60 years. What dictated who got to drive their own car on the mission? Was it if you had one you could take it, and then they paired you up with somebody who had one? How did that work?
Everybody couldn't bring a car even if you had one, but if you're going to an area, I guess they checked with the mission president or something, I don't know, but they obviously did not have the number of mission cars that they did missionaries, and so if they deemed that the missionary, in Fuller's case, was, mature enough. He grew up on a farm and had worked all of his life. I mean, he knew how to work, knew how to take care of stuff, and what process he went through to get to take his car, I don't know exactly, because he was a long ways from being my first companion, but it was on a case-by-case basis. If the bishop, I guess, would vouch for you and the mission needed the extra car or something like that, but it wasn't a given at all.
What was the normal mode of transportation on your mission? Were you walking everywhere?
You walked, you sometimes had a bike, and sometimes in certain parts of the mission, some mission families that were pretty well-to-do would donate a car to the mission, and that would be what you drove.
I see.
But it was never a 56 Ford with fender skirts, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive.
Well, you were probably pretty pleased with that situation as well, weren't you? I mean,
when I went home a little bit later in my life, I had a 56 Ford just like that. Not that color, but mine was baby blue, but it was the same thing.
Okay. Well, I didn't realize it was just as cool to you as it was to us, I was going to say a minute ago, with 75,000 missionaries or so now, the church is much more regimented than it was then. The church has cars. Sometimes they have to ride by the same. But now, in your day, during that day of that 56 Ford, did the church own and have cars as well? Because
there were mission cars.
They had mission cars. Now,
yes.
Now, in times before that, I've heard stories the missionaries would just come and they would walk everywhere, and they would stay with members at houses, in various houses, because they might have to walk 20 miles and they couldn't get back that day, so they'd stay at the member's house maybe 2 or 3 days. And I've heard stories about that. A lot of missionaries rode bicycles. Did you ever ride a bicycle? You're a big guy. I never saw you on a bicycle.
I grew up riding bikes, but did I ride one in the mission field? No.
Never did.
That's all we had on my mission. I rode bicycle the whole 2 years, or trains, in Europe. So
it would depend on where you were, what the distance you had to travel, and all that kind of stuff. But they did what they had to do. But where we were, I was always in an area like Atmore, where we covered a big area. We couldn't have. Well, I guess we could walk it and stay with members, but it wasn't very productive, you know what I mean?
Right.
Well, now, we managed to hook up several years ago. I don't know the details. I think it was mostly through my brother Greg that bumped into a relative of yours. Can you tell us that story of how our reconnection took place?
My sister and her husband went on 2 senior couple proselyting missions where they'd send them into parts of the church where they could use a little bit more help with leadership and other kinds of things, and they sent them down there, and I think your brother-in-law was the branch president at the time.
I think that was my I think that was my brother Greg's son-in-law. You're talking about
Yep,
Will,
that's
right?
that's who it was. And there was some birthday party going on for one of his kids or something, and so my sister Dolores and her husband Vern were in that area, so they were invited to the party. So in comes Gregory, and they get talking back and forth like you do mention, where you from, how, ta-da, ta-da, and found out she was from Richland, Washington. So Gregory says to her, well, by chance would you know an elder Kenneth Raymond Gale? And my sister didn't know if they were wanted to know about that because I'd been peddling drugs or what. Why would they know? Why would that connection be made? And she couldn't even respond. So her husband had to say, yeah, that's her brother. And so there you go.
And the contact, your sister, I guess, called you and told you about that conversation.
Well, we've talked about it. We talked about it this week, in fact, because I talked to Will. I got the number from Will for you or somebody, and I talked to him this past week.
Oh, okay.
So
okay. And that was down in what branch? Andalusia branch, I believe it was.
that was where it was, Andalusia. That's right.
Okay. Okay.
The small world until you try to paint it.
Now, you made a trip down this way. At the time that happened, I was peripherally, I think I spoke to you on the phone a time or two, but I was living in Colorado. And but subsequent to that encounter, you made a trip down here, did you not? You actually
Yes,
came
I
to
did.
visit the area again.
I had my second son was a police officer at the time in Northport, Alabama, right next to Tuscaloosa, where the University of Alabama or whatever is that's there.
Okay.
So we went down to see him, and when I saw how close it was to Atmore, he said, "Well, just take my vehicle." So we drove down to Atmore and stayed at Gregory's house and went to church on Sunday, and then Rob flew down there because he was a pilot. He flew a small plane down there and gave different people rides and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know what year that was. I haven't got back that far in my journal yet. But
that had to be like 2007 or something like that.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
The thing that was interesting about that church on Sunday was the fast and testimony meeting, and your dad kept nudging me, sitting next to me, and say, "Elder Gale, get up and preach to him." And I was trying to get him to go to sleep, and he wouldn't. So I finally got up and bore my testimony and did my thing or whatever, But it was a good experience, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the experiences you had when you were here that you remember? Anything unusual in general?
Other than the Albritton family.
Other than the Albritton family, yeah.
I don't know if they're all Britain, but the other family that was very interesting was the branch president, U.B. Kuhn, the one that I knew the best out of. Well, I knew two of them pretty well, Judy Cochran and Glenna Beach. But I know we were there one day to dinner, and I was helping do stuff, and I always like to help when I'm in the kitchen, and I was doing the mashed potatoes, and she comes over to me. I don't know her very well at this stage of the game, and she says, "Elder Gale, if you whip those potatoes till they're slick, I'll flog you." And it was that kind of thing. We were at Cochran's one night, and he had stepped out on the back porch or someplace, I don't know, and Judy's in the other room, and she's saying, "Lefty," and he didn't respond, and she said it 2 or 3 more times. I said, "Sister Cochran, Lefty went outside." She comes in the room. She came in the room where I was, and she says, "Elder Gale, if you don't stop, I'm going to flog you." Well, at that time, I'm not even sure I knew what flog was, but I wasn't interested in it. Whatever it was didn't sound good. So
That's funny. Lefty and Judy are here. They've moved to Pensacola and roundabout for many years. But they are back in Atmore for the last few years. They're in their early 80s, which that sounds familiar to you, doesn't it? Early 80s. You should be about 80 now.
Yeah, I'm turning 81 this year. I talked to him the other day for about 10 minutes.
Yeah. I think he's maybe 81 or 82. He's about the same age. So they were young. We were all young
Ubi Coon's son, Pete, who wasn't, I don't think he was living here at the time, but he's back here. He's just like Ubi pretty much, but he's in our branch too now, Pete Coon.
Yeah, pretty much a spitting image of Ubi, tall. But any other experiences you had? Any other families you remember?
Well,
You remember the Mitchums?
the thing about that was interesting in Atmore is, a lot of places I went in the South, is that everybody was always very nice to you, even if they didn't. Even if we got a family that wasn't interested, when we get ready to leave, they'd say, "Y'all come back and spread lunch, you hear?" Well, that they were always, I mean, a different breed than what I've seen in a lot of places I've been, because they're always very, genuine, nice, but just don't come play in my sandbox kind of thing if I don't want you to, But it was a good experience for me.
They're kind of proprietary.
It was.
Well, tell me now. You served your mission and you went back to Washington. And what happened to you? What have you done all these years? Tell me. Maybe you could encapsulate. I know you got a wife and you got some children, don't you? Tell us.
I have some of each. Yeah, I only have one wife, but I have more than one child.
What do you say?
I have some of each.
How many wives do you have?
I came back to we lived in Moses Lake, Washington when I went on my mission where I graduated from high school, but my dad got summoned by the church. He built churches up in different areas for the church, helped build them.
Mm-hmm.
They called him to go on a mission to, well, it's not a mission, but come down to Richland, Washington, because there was a stake center being built, and they wanted to do as much as they could with volunteer labor. So they had to have somebody in charge, so that happened to be my dad. So when I came home from my mission, I came to Richland, Washington, and it's a government town, so Brigham Young didn't lay it out. There was absolutely no rhyme or reason to the way this town's laid out, which is kind of like government. The oxymoron for the government is government intelligence, you know what I mean? But I came back here and they were building this church, so I stayed here and worked and what have you. And then when summertime came, this young lady that had met her sister, when I talked to seminary, this young lady came home from BYU, and I went to a dance, and they used to have girls' choice, where the girl could come ask the guy. If they wouldn't get off the wall and come do their job, then the girl would go ask them. So she came to me and asked me on a girl's choice to dance, so I did, and she said, "You're Marvin Gale's brother." That's my younger brother. And I said, "Yes." "Whose relative are you?" And she said, "Well, Marilyn Ruse." Well, I had been talking to her ex-boyfriend, and so I said, "Well, you must be Cheryl." And then she goes by Sherry now, but you would have had to call 911, because what's the chance I know her name, right?
Right.
That was, let's see, that would have been in the spring of '63. And that fall, she had gone 2 years to BYU. Well, she'd gone 1 year. We went back that fall, and she came back again to BYU. She finished a 2-year secretarial office management type class. And so we went back to school, and she had a roommate from Wyoming, and I had my brother Doug for a roommate. And long story short, after we dated for a couple of years, we traded roommates. Doug got Levon for a roommate, and I got Sherry, and we got married in the Salt Lake Temple by Thomas S. Monson, which was not the president of the church at the time, but he was an apostle. And how that happened was Doug was in the Canadian mission, and he said, "If any of you get married and I'm in town, I'd like to perform the wedding." So anyway, then we stayed at BYU. We dropped out 1 year to work, because you run out of money when you're newlyweds, and I could never. She still razzes me sometimes about it. It took me 2 years to ask her, but I couldn't marry and then take him home and sit at my daddy's table and have him support me. That wasn't part of my cherry temperament.
Sure.
So I had to get where I knew I could support her before we got married. But anyway, we lived in Richland and worked for my dad, and then we went back to school. And then when I graduated from BYU in 1969, I went to work for an insurance company in a training program, went to Los Angeles for 3 months, and they transferred me up to Seattle. We stayed there. It was a 5-year training program, and I went through it in 3 years, and they wanted to move me on to Hawaii or Phoenix or Los Angeles, which I'd already been to Los Angeles with them for 8 weeks, and I wasn't real fond of that traffic for a farm boy. It was, not a good thing. So I was sitting there contemplating what my next move was. They gave me a choice of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Phoenix, Hawaii. The reason I didn't take Hawaii is at the time you would make 80 cents on the dollar. It cost you enough more to live that you really weren't making what you thought you were making because you spent more than what you made to live. So my dad comes up he never came up to Bellevue, Seattle area just to be doing it. So he comes up, asked if he could come on one weekend, and he said Nelson and Gale Construction at that time had about 30 people working for him, all the crafts, the plumber, the electrician, the roofer, whatever. And he was running the crews, but he's a finish carpenter, and he got tired of all the people grousing and backbiting each other, whatever they do. So he said, I'm looking for somebody to come back and run the crews. Do you know of anybody? And I said, well, could I do it? And he said, certainly you could do it. And I said, ask me. And he looked at me for a minute and he said, I said, absolutely, I'll put in my notice Monday. So long story short, I left Liberty Mutual, went back here to Richland, and that would have been in about 65, something like that. And I stayed with my dad till he retired. Then I went to work for a couple of bigger companies that didn't march to my same kind of music, because I'm pretty much black and white, cut and dried kind of thing. So I went out to work in the area as a facility engineer for 20 years. But the whole time I was there, I kept building houses because that's what I've always liked to do, and that's what I do well. So I did the area thing for about 20 years, and then I had a company, but I started a bigger one called Gale Developments. Got my nephew involved in it, and then we went to Gale Roof Construction, which it is today. And I kept building houses and, built my house I live in right now, 46 years ago, I guess. And here we are. So now the company is still going. Gale Roof Construction last year did about a dozen houses and 200 remodels, which isn't a large company, but for this area, nobody does as many remodels on the whole West Coast probably as we did last year. But so my strength is whatever. But
now, have you been actively involved? I know you're getting a little long in the tooth there. Are you still climbing on houses and stuff, right?
I don't do a lot with the houses. When they hit snags with subcontractors or something that won't behave, they call me, and they call me the big dog. So I'm supposed to call them and tell them to behave.
We called you too, big dog.
That's right. Side note, we were traveling one time, and you step up to the counter to check in the hotel, and they ask if we have any pets. And Sherry says, well, I've only got this one with me, but I'll keep track of him. And they look at her like, say what? She says, well, in the company where he works, they call him the big dog. So he's my only pet right now. But right now, this year I'll turn 81. And we've lived in the house. We're in right now. We built it 46 years ago.
Okay.
So we pretty much, Sherry had been here, I don't know, she came here when she was about 5. The only time she's been gone is when we went away to school, and then we went to LA for work for a while, and then we went to Seattle, and then when they wanted to send me some big cities again, I'm a farm boy, so I said, if I had my druthers, I'd rather not. So I didn't. So here I am.
Now, Ken, I know, I'm assuming that you have remained active and engaged in the church activity over these last 60 years or so. Is that correct?
Yes, people have asked me before, is your church a way of life? And I said, no, it isn't. It is life. every decision you make in some way hinges on the church. A side note, when I was working for Liberty Mutual in Seattle, that insurance company, when you first go, they take you out to lunch and everybody gets to quiz you and all that kind of stuff. And they checked into me a little bit because they're sitting at this lunch table and they say to me, you don't smoke or drink or chase wild women. What do you do for entertainment? Well, the guy sitting next to me, one of my office mates, said, well, he's a Mormon. Don't you know anything about Mormons? And he gave him probably a 10-minute discourse, and he was spot on. So I've thought to myself several times, what if me not knowing him and I didn't think he knew me, what if I said, okay, I'll take a martini or whatever the thing was at the time, how would that affected his life, right?
Yeah, and you would never even know it.
That's right. I was traveling with a guy that was a member, and we were in Pittsburgh or someplace, and they were asking what kind of drinks we want, and this guy says, well, we'll take a Virgin Bloody Mary. Well, me being naive as I was, I didn't know what a Bloody Mary was, much less a virgin one, so they brought it, and it was tomato juice. So they just left out, but that happened to me several times in my life. I haven't been a bishop, but I've been a counselor in young men's, and they haven't let me be in young women's yet, but I've done most of the stuff, executive secretary twice to a bishop in a bishopric, but have we stayed active? Yeah, we stay active. Like I said, life has to rotate. You are what you are, right?
Right.
And you can't separate, in my case, you cannot separate life from the church.
Well, Ken, let me ask you a question. This is what do you call it? A Mormon church sort of interview. I mean, a lot of my friends that listen will probably be familiar with our culture and so forth. I heard a statistic which seems to be pretty close. There are many missionaries. You were 19, I guess, when you came out on your mission. A lot of young boys come out at 18. They volunteer, and they come out and spend 2 years of their life, some would say their prime time, on that mission, and they go back home. And I follow a lot of the missionaries. I watch them on Facebook as they get married and show off their children. Some of them have, several children now. Many of them go back home and get lazy. They quit going to church. They get inactive in the church. In fact, I've heard that number is as much as 40-50%. What are your thoughts on how that could happen? Because these young boys and girls out here on their mission, they are stalwarts. We look to them. They come out and, like you introduced us to the gospel. If I had 10 years later learned that Elder Gale not active in the church anymore, he no longer embraces that, I would have felt terrible. I would just naturally assume that when this young man or woman is down here preaching the gospel, that his testimony is strong and he'll be there. But 40%? Come on. What are your thoughts on that? How does that happen?
I don't know what the percentage is exactly, but it's happened to a few of the young men that I grew up with, that they came home and went and get their little spiel at sacrament meeting because they're back, but never went back again. How could that happen? I have thought about that 1,000 times, not to exaggerate if I've thought about it once. Because to me, commitment, if you're not committed, then you're not going to do it. But they just don't get committed or don't have a testimony. But if you have a testimony stamped so indelibly in your mind as I do in mine, it would be impossible for me to walk away. Just one quick example of that. I went to I don't know if he'll remember this, but I went to a discussion one time when for some reason Thor couldn't go or something, and Ronnie went with me. And the lady that was there, we had talked to her, we had not talked to her husband, and every time they'd ask me something, I'd answer it, and she'd poke her husband and say, see, I told you he would know. Well, that night when I bore my testimony, I didn't feel like it was me, and I didn't even feel like I was sitting on my chair. And here it came, and we made some impressions that night. But in the mission, I'm not making the impression. I'm a emissary, or I'm a tool in the Lord's hands, right?
Yeah.
If you don't listen in your mind and get the commitment,
I have,
it's just like marriage.
Here in the last few years, Avis is married to a Filipina girl. He went to the Philippines, and he's been married for 18, 19 years. And then when I went through a divorce, this is Philip talking, I decided I would go to the Philippines and find me a Filipina bride. And I did, and I became enmeshed in that community of the Filipinos that have immigrated here to the U.S. in certain areas. And they have the church in the Philippines is growing so rapidly, and they are still in a kind of a primitive state, similar to what we had here in the 60s and 50s. And the members of the church in the Philippines, all of them that I talk to that are members, they have that same basic idea about missionaries. You know, the missionary represents the best there is. The missionary is the most righteous. The missionary is, you know, that's their attitude, and they would be devastated, like Lloyd said, if they found out the missionary that they had in their ward or branch became inactive or started, got away from the church. But I understand that concept, but I think a lot of the young guys aren't totally committed. I mean, they go out because they're kind of coerced to. In some ways, that would be my only conjecture about why that happens.
Well, some missionaries that I've known went out because if they were not a return missionary, the girlfriend would marry him. It would cause their grandma to have a heart attack or whatever else. So they did not go.
Yeah.
For the right reason. And so when I was in the mission field, in fact, there was somebody sitting not doing anything, and so President Lyman, the mission president at the time, called Salt Lake one day from my apartment and said that such and such doesn't want to be here, he wants to go home. And President Hinckley had the red phone for missions at that point in time, answering all the problems. And what he said to President Lyman was, if he wants to go home, President Lyman, send him home. Lord bless you. Anything else? You cannot be, the church does not want you to be on a mission if you don't want to be on a mission. So when some people go, they go for the wrong reason. People have asked me before, when they know what my life has been like, and they say, okay, if you had to pick, I was fortunate enough to graduate from BYU. And so they say, if you could pick between your college degree and your mission, what would you do? And I said, for me personally, I'd definitely have to take the mission, because the mission did 50 times more for me in the eternal scheme of things than the college degree opened a lot of doors and allowed me to get where I went, but it didn't do for me what the mission did. And so when somebody doesn't go, it's commitment to anything else you do in life. It's from being married to your job. People go on a job and they get paid a bunch of money and they sit around and don't do anything. When I was, a short side note, when I was in Seattle working for Liberty Mutual Insurance and they wanted me to stay, there were 6 of us in the Seattle office doing claims and whatever else they gave us to do, but 2 of us carried probably 70% of the office load. And so when he came and asked me, why do you want to leave? And I said, because you guys reward incompetence. He said, what does that mean? I said, well, I carry, not bragging, but I carried about 80 cases on my assignment, and I turned about 30 of them a month. And the other guys would carry about 30 on assignment and turn 10 a month. And I said, you pay them the same, you give them the same company cars, same benefits. And he said, well, how can you know what they make? I said, don't be naive, man. Everybody knows what everybody makes, so it's kind of a commitment. You decide. That was the thing as a point of interest. I come from a family of 9 children, 7 boys and 2 girls, so I know. And Lloyd, we were a little bit like you when we were out in the country. Me and my brother would make our summer play suits out of a burlap bag, cut holes in the bottom for our legs, and little onion tie strap around our waist. And Mom would get mad on primary day because we couldn't find our shoes. That was because we hadn't worn them for a week. And so, and then now I've got 5 children. I've got 3 girls and 2 boys and 12 grandchildren. But it's, the commitment in life. I don't care. It's like the chicken and pig are walking down the street, and the chicken sees a sign that says ham and eggs, $1.99. Let's go do it. And the pig says, "Yeah, for you, it's a contribution. For me, it's total commitment." Or Cortez, when he lands in South America and he wants to stay, and all the people on the ships don't want to stay. If you can remember the history lesson, they were going to leave the next morning, so he got up and went and burned their ships. Now, will they stay now? Yes, they'll stay. So does somebody have to burn your ship to get you to commit?
Yeah.
I was in Kentucky one time on my daughter's ward where she lived at the time, and I drove them nuts because they were talking about home teaching, now ministering assignments, and it wasn't very good. And I said, well, brethren, if somebody gave you $100 a visit this next month for your ministering and your home teaching, would your percentages pick up? And nobody said anything because I was afraid to, and I said, you know it'd pick up, so you have to decide, why are you going? Are you going because you committed to the bishop to go, or because you wanted the $100? So in life, in my life, it's you commit to do something, and you do not at that point have any more options. You just do it.
Well,
See, life is what happens to you when you're planning for life, right?
Yeah,
The other thing is interesting.
that kind of reminds me of an incident. When I lived in Atlanta, it was a big ward up there, and one of the families in the ward had a son about to go on a mission. And his father gave a talk one day. His father, in this talk, the father said, I'm just anxious for my son to get out on his mission and get home so he can get on with his life. That was the father standing up in the sacrament meeting saying that. I just want him to get out there and get his mission done so he can get on with his life.
Why was he going on a mission, yeah?
Yeah, that just seemed, that was the, that didn't sound right to me. I think the mission should be, that's the main thing, part of your life,
Well, at that stage in your life, if you do it right, it's like, right is right even if no one is doing it. Wrong is wrong even when everybody does it. So the right thing to do, in our family we had 4 missionaries out at the same time. In fact, with this big write-up in the church news, and I've still got a copy of it, but when we were growing up, all the time we were growing up, bless my mother's like you, Lloyd, at your mother's knees where you got a lot of your stuff. Well, everybody was going to always go on a mission. And the first 4 in the life, my sister and the 3 next brothers in line, all were on missions at the same time. Doug was in Canada, Dolores was in Great Lakes, Leon was in East Central States, and I was in Southern States, which then became Florida. But how many lives got touched because we were willing to do that? I don't know. But it'd be interesting to know, but you can't know. But it was not for the All Britons or for anybody else. The scriptures tell us that if you labor all the days of your life and cry in repentance unto this people and bring it, save it be one soul, how great will be your life, right? So what's the one soul that Lloyd has to bring? It's not me or Philip or anybody else, it's you. And if you can't bring yourself, then you messed up a little bit.
Well, Ken, you can know that you have had a profound influence on the All Britons, and I'm sure through multiple others. But you can know specifically that you have had a profound influence that we even remember. There's so many people I've met in my life I can't even remember their names. Maybe I have some faint recollection of sharing a foxhole with somebody in Vietnam. Kind of see his face. Remember, he was a blonde-haired guy. He said something funny. That's all I remember. But to have as a profound influence as you have, you and Elder Fuller, on our lives, you change. What's the old poem? Frost. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I I chose the one less traveled by, and that has made all
Yep.
the difference. Now, Yogi Berra said that a little bit different way. He said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Well, there's not any one of us, I don't believe, in our family, even Ronnie, that does not remember Elder Glenn J. Fuller and Elder Kenneth Raymond Gale. Those names,
right.
full names. We remembered after all those many years.
That's right. And so thank you, Ken. We've laid down about an hour track here. I'm going to post this on our YouTube channel, and I'll send you the link to it so that you'll be able to share it.
Okay, but
it's just
You-
sort of a
you
little
say-
historical narrative for us.
you say that we had an impression in your life, but you did it to ours as well.
Well, I'm always amazed when anybody would tell me that, because, sometimes when I get on my pity pot, I sit down and I feel a little discouraged, wondering what difference have I made. And then somebody tells me something that I said 30 years ago, and I say, I don't remember even saying that. It sounds kind of like me, but somebody else say, you said this and it changed my life. And every now and then that happens. So it wasn't that I was deliberately trying to pontificate. I just thought something and said something, and it influenced somebody's life. So
That's because life is what happens to you while you're planning for life.
that's right. That's right. Well, our guest today has been Kenneth Raymond Gale. He's out in Richland, Washington. And thank you so much, Ken, for taking this time to share with us and kind of bring us up to date on where you are.
Good talking to you, Ken.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate all of you.
Is there anything we've left out that you wanted to say?
No, just have Ronnie get back on the stick again a little bit.
Well, you know what, Ronnie, he's my older brother, and Ronnie was 16, and he did what so many do in this neck of the woods. I've asked these missionaries, why'd you come on your mission? And an inordinate amount of times the answer was, well, I had to get a girl, because the girls out in Utah won't go out with you unless you go, they won't marry you. And I thought that was kind of comical when I heard that. But you don't realize the significance of it until in the South, you remember the church as a young man or a young woman, you might be the only Mormon in your whole school. And so you end up marrying out of the church. Sometimes that works out with conversion, but when two people are on the different page, they go one way or the other, and they usually go, they go the wrong way. Either they both quit going to church, or one gives up, and that's what happens so much down here in the South, is these marriages out of the church. And I think any church would say that, regardless of whether what religion you are, that the wise, the non-wise thing would be to marry somebody and share a household for life with somebody that doesn't agree fundamentally with your philosophy of life. It's a terrible thing.
A point of interest about that, and I'll quit, is that there was several times on my mission in smaller communities, Defuniak Springs, Atmore, whatever, that mothers would get so enthralled with Elder Fuller or Elder Gale or Elder Albritton or whoever that they would do their darndest to get the elder to agree to come back and marry Susie or something. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Because there wasn't that many active men, and here come these young guys driving a Ford with fender skirts and having a testimony. Man, how can we get them back down here, type of thing.
That's what happened to Bill Beach.
Yeah, he came back. It's kind of like my brother likes to say that God has a sense of humor. Some of the stuff He puts on us, but to send these two handsome young men down south with a cool Ford with fender skirts and have to follow the rule of no girls, no dates for 2 years.
Well, he must have had a sense of humor. He wouldn't have made some of the people he did.
True. Well, Ken, thanks a lot. We love you, and thanks for taking the time to lay this down and talk with us.
Just send me the link. I appreciate both of you, okay?
I will. God bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.